Hi, welcome to the workshop.
This is the first in a series of videos where we learn to make jewellery the traditional way.
Today we will be making a single stone or a solitaire ring. So to get from the bottom one, which is 2.4mm square, to the top one where we have larger ends and a thinner middle, what we're going to do is go to the mill. So this is going to give a graduation to the depth on the shank once it's turned around. What we've got to do is squash the middle thinner than the ends. So that means we put it in the mill about halfway through. We tighten the top down on the mill until it's squashing the metal, and then we roll it until just before each end. We don't want to go too far, and we can always undo it and check how far it's gone, and that there looks about perfect. So in order to bend this round into this, what we'll find is as we bend it round, the thin section on there will bend first. So to get around that, what we're going to do is clamp it in the vise and tap it with a hammer on both ends. And as you can see, we've gotten around the problem of the fat end not wanting to bend as much as the thin parts. Now we can just bend the rest around by hand or using pliers, depending whatever you find easiest. There we have it. Emil is just tidying up by filing the sides of the shank in order to scribe some lines on the side. So he's just scribing some lines using a pair of dividers. He's going to follow these lines with his saw blade when he cuts. And he's scribing both sides of the ring. He's divided some lines across the ring. So we've got it to the stage now where we can start bending the tops up. So just stick the knife in the end and just lever the end up the way, and it's going to look not very great to start with, but we can fix that by grabbing it with a pair of pliers. These particular ones are half round on one side with a rounded end, just to avoid unnecessarily marking on the inside of curves.
In comparison, this one, the split, looks a bit shorter than that.
You can always just cut it a bit further and then open it out a bit more, or if it had gone too far, you could always just squeeze it together a bit, put a bit more of a curve in the top edge and the top section, and it would look shorter still. So we got some flat wire or flat bar. It's about 0.8 thick and about 4.3-ish deep. So what we're trying to do is turn up kind of like this. So the way you've got to do that, you start with a straight piece, which is 0.8 thick. So what we do first of all is we take these half round pliers, and they have a slot cut into them. This is to stop it slipping as I do the next stage. And what we do is we just take it and we start curving it sideways, and you'll find it buckles as you're doing it. That's no big deal. Just take a flat pair of pliers and just squash it flat again. And you're aiming for the inside of the circle to be roughly the size of a £2 coin, and that should get you enough of a taper later on. So now we've got it to this stage, we're going to take round and flat pliers, and we're going to grab the piece and we're going to turn it this way. We turn just the end to start with because we have a little flat there. And we're going to cut the flat bit off. And we're going to continue to bend it. And we might start a little bit further along so that we can get the curve in the end part. Compare it to the size of the stone. We're a little bit narrow there, but that's alright. We can just push it further up the pliers and squeeze it to open it out a bit more. So that looks a bit more like the same curve as the stone. What you can do is take your stone and take the width of it and divide that off 1, 2, 3 times to get your length that you would turn. But I've just been doing it by eye. So now we've got a piece that looks a bit like that, and we'll squash it together like this until it's more or less what we need. And you can see that the stone fits fairly nicely, and we're just going to solder that together using hard solder. This is a collet punch. This one is 17 degrees. You can get other angles of collet punch, and all this does is it just evens out any discrepancies when where I've made it. So I just tap it in there. It doesn't need to be much, and we can see now that it's nice and even all the way around, and that's ready for our next stage. What we intend is for it to look a little bit like our rough drawing here. So at the moment we've got the top section of the collet there, and we'll put the bottom section on afterwards. So we've got 6 marked out on the top there, and that's where the tops of each claw will be. And on the side we're just going to make, it doesn't have to be perfect, just a rough U shape. We'll have to tidy all this up by eye later on, and all we're doing is just knowing where we're going to cut. So we can see we've got the rough U shapes on each sort of section. So you can see we're just drawing a rough U shape on each section, with the top corresponding with where the marks are. The next thing we'll do is take our saw frame, and we're just going to mark both sides of the claw. So we cut a little bit to one side there, and a little bit to one side of the other one. So we can see there, and we're going to go in between the two where we've drawn the U shape. We're just going to cut a rough U shape, remembering not to just keep cutting down straight, but to turn the saw as we go. Cut halfway down one side, down the other, and that leaves us with a sort of UEV kind of shape-ish, roughed out on the side of the collet there. So we've got this all roughed out with the saw. What we're going to do now is take a round or a rat's tails file, is this, and tidy up in between each. And it's best to do one, miss one out, do another one. Cool, so now Emil's done the scoops on this and all the scallops, we're going to put a little V shape in the bottom of there using 3 square file, that's called a tri-square. See, we've got it all filed to a good sort of basis for soldering into our ring. I haven't drilled the hole in the middle. I'll leave that till later because it's very difficult to drill a hole in the middle and just hold the tiny little collet like this. We want, on this particular collet, we want 2 of the claws at the north and south, or east and west depending how you look at it, to meet up with the top of the shoulders on here, there and there. What I'll do is I'll file these shoulders to a bit of a point just to give them some shape and a bit more of a flowing look. Okay, so I've just put a little point on the tips of the shoulders here. The only bits you need to be really clean are the bits near where the collet is going to be soldered in, so along here, and maybe inside just a little bit as well. If it was platinum, we might consider completely polishing it before we solder it together, but this is just silver, so we'll just clean it up, get it to a good buffed finish, and then afterwards we can polish it. I like to use a pair of these, which are specifically designed tweezers for soldering collet to a shank. Drill a hole right in the middle. Start off small and then go bigger. Less chance of the hole wandering where you don't want it then. And just use round burrs to just trim it up. I hope you found this useful. Feel free to like and subscribe.
And see you soon in our next video. Bye.
Bye.